Good morning, everybody. It's Alex. I am driving to work, and I guess the two episodes of the Mark Rosewater podcast I listened to had a really big impact on me. So we're heading off to work, got a nice long commute, and so that, you know what that means. Oh my God. It means a nice little chat here where we're going to discuss some fun, nerdy topics. Today I have on the docket doing is playing games for research / going through my Steam backlog. This is certainly one of those topics where it's probably just goofing off, and to be fair, I think there are some days where goofing off is probably the best you can do. You got to manage your energy. do what you have based on your energy. You can do based on your energy level. And my energy level yesterday was quite low after staying up till like 5 o'clock in the morning 2 nights ago. I'm at the point where I went back, installed like a bunch of like random Steam games, a bunch of like random games all over, mostly indie stuff or things that I kind of wanted to be more classic games that I wanted to be inspired by, and I spent some time just like going through stuff and trying to figure out what which are games that I would buy, first of all, again, if I was in that position. That's step one. Which games would I think about wanting to play again in the future? That's like step two. And then which games, after I turn them on, would I want to keep playing for more than like 5 minutes? That's step three. So there's because the goal of making games, in my opinion, is not, obviously, there's the making money goal, but I would like to make an actually high quality, well-designed game that people want to pick up and then want to go keep playing. And so I think it's worth looking at the ways that indie games try to do this the most, because I think AAA, they are able to get away with a lot of the value proposition of a game not just being in the game design or like the immediate appeal. There's also the brand recognition. There's the maybe graphics or storyline or some sort of whatever multiplayer social element that comes with playing like the next or the current big AAA release, right? So I think indie games probably more useful to look at. So that's what I did, and I got through probably a dozen or so yesterday. I still have 150 or more of like random little tiny ass games to look through. But we need to get to all those. So like step one, as I said, is making some kind of game that actually was appealing enough for me to go buy, or and my I think my game buying habits are there's a couple of ways that manifest, and I'm using myself as the case study here. I am certainly, originally was a console gamer, mostly Nintendo, mostly handheld stuff, and was definitely a follower of, like the major Nintendo franchises and stuff, and then became, that kind of spun into collecting and going through and then trying to find all of and play through any sort of like super historically significant games that left a greater impact on the gaming industry. So I've gone through and played bits and pieces of like one of the games I played through last night was Rogue, the original Rogue, and that was actually very interesting. Um, I've gone through, played most of like the important Nintendo games that came out, except for like Mario 3, I think, which is a big one. Um, I have gone through, a number of like I went through almost all of the classic era like Blizzard titles. The only things I haven't really finished is like Diablo 2. But yeah, there's like a whole bunch of stuff, and that's kind of my buying pattern, because I'm sort of interested in some of like the historical nature of games, as well as finding the stuff that's left a mark. That's just kind of how I'm operating and looking for media in general. Okay, so there's that. Then there's also like word of mouth. So games that I've heard of from a friend, or they got super popular for some period of time. Those are games that I probably am interested in picking up at or playing at some point, trying out. So that's always an inroad there. But if you're starting out from zero, you probably don't have that level of word of mouth. So I don't know how that's more of like once you are successful, then that is you're able to capitalize on that. Had to have some morning coffee. Oh, that was very cute. I'm passing by like the elementary school, and some little girl just gave a big hug to the crossing guard. That was very cute. And no, not in a creepy way. This is just my morning drive. It goes right past the school. So yeah, there's that. And then there's, I think, creating some kind of like a hook. And this is a little bit of something that I did some insight, like some diving into. So there's a couple ways you could get like a hook, just from like a completely cold introduction. So you have to there's a couple of things. There's like the genre is a hook of if you create a game in a genre that somewhat that you've got fans of, you're trying to cater to, like that's like an inroad for them. There's sort of like the visual style hook of like how the art style, art direction looks for your game. If it really stands out or is like high quality enough, that can be a way for people to pick up and like notice a game. If you look at like a game that has like a very, very distinct visual style, I think a lot of people use like Return of the Obra Dinn is a great example of that. Of just I don't think any other game really, especially like modern game, really looks like Return of the Obra Dinn. A lot of indie games, they look, they go with like sort of like the low fidelity graphics. You end up with a lot of like Super Nintendo or NES, like sort of pseudo styled games. And for some of those games where like a Shovel Knight or a Stardew Valley, where they're specifically trying to evoke that connection to some classic game series, like that war is very strong, I think. Like Shovel Knight obviously draws so much from like the original Mega Man and Castlevania games, even like Zelda 2, and the fact that it has that sort of art style, it's not quite true representation of what the graphics looked like back then, but it is it's close enough where you kind of get it, and it's like, oh, if I want to play a new Mega Man game, whatever the fuck Capcom was doing back in the 2010s, let me ignore that, and I'll go play Shovel Knight instead. And that worked out very, very successfully for Yacht Club, or Stardew Valley, where it looks like a Super Nintendo game, and it looks like Harvest Moon, right? It looks like a classic Harvest Moon game, and there you go. It basically is. uh, and yeah, so that's a hook too. But there are a lot of games that also just kind of use the pixel graphics in a less motivated way, or one where that's kind of just the visual style of most indies. So it's not really something that stands out as much anymore. I wouldn't think. I think people have like found where like pixel graphics like have their flaws and are not as functional as are not as functional every single use case, right? Yeah, so but that's a hook. Some sort of unique visual style, or one that like matches some sort of like marketing aspect of the game. That's a big hook there. And I think in terms of if you're showing people the game or like putting together a trailer, that's a thing that is probably going to stand out the most. Apart from if there's some sort of like thematic hook. So thematic hook would be sort of like I guess like the core fantasy of the game. So let's say in like Minecraft, the hook is you can fully reshape the world. You can build any structure, anything that your heart desires. That's the hook of Minecraft, and it's a very strong one. Back to Shovel Knight. The hook of Shovel Knight is it's like the 2010 version of Mega Man. It's the modernized version of this classic game that has all this love and care put into it to to do all this stuff. Like that thematic hook, if it's interesting enough, then that is also a good way to like get people to like think about the game and come over to it. And so these are all like different pieces. This is all like marketing stuff, but it's also like in terms of like designing an interesting game that people would want to play. Like that, these are critical things to think of, I think. So that is that's a whole bunch of stuff of like how I am thinking of like what are the things that I am thinking of when as I put together some sort of product, some sort of like game, and try to figure out what is something people would want to buy. Step one is, what would people want to buy? Or maybe like you get them to want to buy by wanting to play. But it's similar sort of thing. Okay, then step two, or actually wait, hold up. I guess step one is the want to buy. Step two is the probably want to play in your library. And this is I think with Steam, this is our target platform we're trying to sell to. People end up with these like very large backlogs of games of pretty much whatever it is, especially if they're consuming something like digitally. Games go on sale on Steam all the time, and people are always buying more than they can play. Guilty as charged. And so there comes a point where you pick up enough games, like you're not guaranteed to, even if the game is purchased, it's not guaranteed to be played immediately by the customer. And it's like, how would you I'm trying to think of like how you would do that, or if that's even really an important part of the pipeline. Because like there are, so you do have to be aware of the game, and then you have to buy the game, right? This is the marketing pipeline, and then you have to want to play it. And I think that it's probably unfixable to unless like your game gains some sort of real prestige or notoriety that makes it stand out against like the other stuff that someone has already bought. Obviously there's like, if there's any sort of like secondary monetization strategy, like expansions or whatever it is, that that is probably dependent on someone plays the game. They can buy DLC without playing the game, but it's I would think much more likely if they do. But I'm not sure. I mean, that could be some sort of like support strategy, I guess, like some sort of like post-release updates or something that like keep it interesting if you've had the game in backlog for a longer term, or if the game has been, like I said, very successful, then it could stand out more as something that people would want to play. But I think that's like, I may be mistaken there, that is like part of the pipeline it's not as solvable. But the next thing that I think we've got very tight control over is does the game pass the 5 minute test of, like if I I just downloaded a bunch of games, a bunch of like little random games, and a lot of them I was not interested in playing for more than 5 minutes. Of either there was some sort of like high amount of pain points, or there were something just like did not work on a technical level. These are all real examples. Or there did not seem to be anything more interesting, anything more developing in how the game experience was progressing from when I first started opening it. And so let me walk you through a couple of these examples. So number one is the first one was the game just had too many pain points, and I didn't see it as worth my time to continue playing. And that game was Original Rogue. Ooh. Yeah, I'm hearing some boos. So I played. I bought Original Rogue on Steam, which and I think the game actually is shareware now, so it's probably didn't really need to do that, but it was fine. But I was interested in seeing, the origin of this like roguelite genre, of seeing kind of like where it came from, looking into some early PC gaming stuff, because I've mostly, actually like very early like DOS games and stuff is a sort of like a branch of game history that I have not really thoroughly explored. So there's all things that I was kind of interested in doing. But then I kind of played, maybe 5 minutes of it, maybe 5-10 minutes of it. And it was kind of fun. Rogue is, that one for one, like D&D dungeon clone that I had been thinking of. That's Mystery Dungeon, was just Rogue with, sort of like better UI UX. And I think, obviously the game is incredibly technically limited. It's kind of, and I think for my personal experience, it was heavily reliant on my pre-existing knowledge of tabletop RPG and desire to, and reliance on like that fantasy. I'm gonna blow my nose real quick. I hope that wasn't too gross. But that is Rogue. Was that one for one dungeon exploration with some monsters creeping around and like loot to find, and there's like this light mechanic and all these things. It had it all in there. But I found myself just not interested in it that much, because I have definitely played better versions of that game. I have played more interesting, more fleshed out versions of that game. Ones that, where the controls or some of the core mechanics came a little bit more naturally, as opposed to just being in sort of like this DOS command menu. And yes, this is from NeoVim Chad over here. It's just Rogue is just it just doesn't have enough there on, like, the idea. I think is still really good, and that core fantasy is still very interesting. It was enough to keep me going for like a couple of floors, right? But like, there are just so many other games that have really made a lot more out of that mechanic, or have more to offer on any of these other dimensions other than just like, gameplay and like ASCII grid. But I think it was very interesting to see, the genesis of that genre and how much of it was there. Like, I really felt like I was playing, it felt like I was playing Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, but only looking at like the mini map in the corner of the screen for like my location and like the enemy location. That's kind of what it felt like. But then every single action that I had to take became very painful. Of like, okay, I picked up a potion. Like, where the hell does that go? Oh, I have finite amount of inventory. Where the hell is that? And like so on and so forth. And then like, I think where I stopped was when I got to the floor where I started to run into like secret doors, and I was like, okay, I'm done. I really do not want to just go around and press S on every single wall around here. And that's, if you look at like later dungeon crawlers, and this is like, a little interesting tangent, like at Zelda 1, very also pretty early dungeon crawling game that has, and I think that has a lot of like, some of these weird painful stuff too, but the core controls of that are very nice. And the action is very interesting, as opposed to sort of like the swing and miss stuff against like little against enemies that are just uppercase characters, which is kind of lame. I think like that is like that's like the minimum amount of presentation I think that was needed to really capture that idea. And obviously Zelda 1, fantastic. It also has that overworld element. If you look at like Diablo 1, this is much later, but Diablo 1 is also that dungeon crawling, randomly generated sort of core gameplay and looking around for all this stuff. But it has that real-time element, and these are things that do make all the difference. And even another one of the games I played, it was maybe the only one that I really saw myself trying to continue, was Crypt of the Necrodancer, and that immediately was very interesting. Just because it has this different, that's the hook, is that it's roguelite dungeon crawler, but has this like musical element to it, and the music is very good. I'm actually very familiar with the music because it's all Danny Baranowski, who did like a lot of the original Binding of Isaac music, and Super Meat Boy as well, I think. And all of the Crypt of the Necrodancer music is in my Spotify work playlist, because it's good non-vocal sort of stuff. It's very, very high energy. So that was a good one, and that I think there's like something that definitely worked for me. It was more interesting than original Rogue. So there. That is like, but that is one of the first things, is if the game is just like too painful to play, or if even in spite of like having a good core idea, if like it's just too painful, or if the game and I think this is like, if the game feel is not good, or non-existent, then like I will stop playing your game. That is, I think that is kind of there. So that was like kind of like the first category. Then second category is games that just did not technically run on my computer. And I think there was only really one of those, and that was Towns. This is a game I bought maybe like 14 years ago on like Steam sale, and it just didn't run because I didn't have Java, some old version of Java runtime installed on my computer. So there you go. That's another one, is make sure the game installer is bundled with all the stuff it needs to actually run. Or I'm not going to play your game, because I cannot be bothered to go install a separate instance of Java runtime just for this one game. This is like a problem that is, I'm like, whenever the game came out, Java runtime was probably on everybody's computer. I'm fairly sure of that, but it's just like not anymore. And if I have to futz around a lot to get your game to like work at all, then I'm at the age and level of patience where I'm just not interested in doing that anymore, unless it's a game where there's some other like very compelling reason for me to come in and play it. I do futz around for Pokemon, but Pokemon is Pokemon. Yeah. So that was another category, is like, technically the game just has to continue to work and at the very least ship with all of the runtime dependencies it needs. And with Java specifically, there may be some sort of like licensing logistical issue. That's very possible. I'm most familiar with deploying like C# runtime dependency stuff, and all of that is very different from Java. I don't know. So that one didn't work out. But good to know. Good to know. Try to, and I think Steam thankfully has that Steamworks common redistributable and the all the C runtime stuff that you can run in the install setup script. So there's like, I think, ways to not not get screwed on that end, or it becomes like a longer term support thing. So that was thing 2. All right, and thing 3 is, this is back to a design thing. This was, the game does not seem to be offering me enough interesting ideas or interesting additional ideas or development on top of its original premise to really keep me wanting to learn more. And so there were a number of games that sort of fit this category, and where their game feel actually was very good. They were running on my computer, and I think a lot of them had some sort of like cool idea or something, but I didn't play any of these for more than 5 minutes. So there were a couple of them. The first one was called McPixel. McPixel was another like game that I bought like just like a super long time ago on Steam, and I didn't really remember why I never really finished it. I remember I played it like once and never really touched it again, and then now I remember. So McPixel is a sort of like little pixel art sprite based sort of adventure / puzzle game where you're presented with like a sequence of like little scenarios, where you have 10 seconds or something to solve them by clicking on the right sequence of objects, or clicking on talking to the right character, adventure game style, or you blow up or die or something. And so your goal is to avoid that, and try to deduce what the correct sequence of elements is. And I don't think it was strong enough to really be interesting past that initial thing, because I don't think the core idea of the adventure games have this problem of the just clicking on every combination of things to win. And I've played a number of bad adventure games where that is really, really big part of it. The Warcraft Lord of the Clans would fall in that category of bad adventure games, I think. But usually adventure games have some sort of there's some sort of build up or fiction where you kind of can start to understand the way the world or the puzzles work, and logically deduce maybe how you're supposed to proceed next. And like a Pokemon or Zelda has adventure game elements, and you have to go around and you got to go find the tea to give to the Saffron City gate guard to go into Saffron City and get to the gym. But again, I think as games have gone on, they're more reliant on they these simple lock and key, click on the right thing puzzles either have become a lot more self-explanatory, or they have just gone away. And I think it's I think that is just a piece of old game design that was just not great. And maybe there was some incentive in terms of padding games out that kept that around, but it's not something that I'm actively really looking to reintroduce myself to. And on top of that, this core idea of everything being working in these super limited time crunch, high pressure, being these little tiny mini puzzles, I felt that basically just did not work, because what you end up doing is you're having to try every single combination of clicking on objects in some order, but your time to reset is horrendously bad, because if you fail a challenge, you kind of cycle to the next of one of the 5 or 6 challenges in the same block. So then you're basically I think the core gameplay is you click on some combination of elements incorrectly and you see it blow up, and then you move on to the next one, and then you just do that, and then maybe you get lucky, and then slowly you're trying to build yourself down to the point where you're able to just retry the 1 or 2 puzzles that are the most archaic. And there is some logical elements to the fiction of what's going on there. It's all a lot of them, in the part I played were there's something that's starting to explode or something. There's something a bomb, or elevators falling out of the sky, and so but they're not always very readable on first glance of what is the actual problem. And so I did basically just have to try a bunch of stupid combinations of things until I got it right. And then even then the combinations of things were or silly or nonsensical, because that it is also kind of like a madcap style game. Excuse me. And so that's a game that sorry, I'm like all congested. That's a game that had a hook. That's a game that had like, I think like, nice looking presentation, and some sort of like, and like the game feel was okay, but the core loop, just really did not work. And I felt that like if I were to just continue playing the game, basically it's just going to be me beating my head against the wall, trying, doing combinatorics until I get through all the puzzles. And so I really was not interested in that, and did not continue playing McPixel. But I guess it was successful enough where the guys made like 3 McPixel games, so that's a lot of like scenarios, that's a lot of puzzles. And I hope like the later ones are a little bit better, but in terms of like initial experience with the game, and I guess this is not my initial this is my come back to it after 15 years experience. Was not too impressed. Another, unfortunately, this is good. This part of the show is just me shitting on a bunch of indie games. But to be fair, like there are a lot of like nice elements of these games. It's just like I think in terms of trying to figure out what really works so that I know what kinds of things I need to build or focus on. Like I've got to be a little bit more ruthless here. So like the next couple games that I played for a little bit that didn't continue were the like Excel games. So there's like a whole bunch of these, all by the same guy, I think. So there's like Ding Dong Excel, there's like Orbit Excel, a whole bunch of these like little micro games basically, and they have like this pretty good game feel and like nice consistent look to them. The core, they have like this some sort of very interesting, like core gameplay element. Like that is very self-explanatory, very easy to use, or get the idea of. But I felt that they kind of just did not continue to have as much interesting to offer if I were to keep going. So there, like I said, there were 2 of them. There's Ding Dong Excel and there's Orbit Excel. Ding Dong is it's kind of like a vertical Pong almost, where basically you have a ball that's flying between 2 paddles, and you just press space bar to like send it from one paddle to the other, and your goal is to rack up a high score, dodging like all this like these random like obstacles and debris that's passing through the middle of the screen. So you kind of have to time it right. If you wait too long, then you lose. If you hit an object, you lose. But if you hit like a power up, and there's like power ups or something, then it's like Pac-Man for a brief period of time. If you smack your ball into an obstacle, then you actually get points as opposed to losing. So that was very compelling for maybe 8 minutes. Of like slamming the thing back and forth, trying to get like a higher score. And I think like the way that the progression in the game really works, I think, is the higher score you get, the more like coins or whatever you get to just like unlock skins and stuff. So that's really the only thing. The game is like that. It's very small scale. Like it like that's it. I've described the entire game to you. And like the presentation is very nice. The actual feel of like that core ping pong paddle style thing is all pretty cool, but like I just didn't I got to like 85 points or something, and then I just really was not interested in continuing because I was like, okay, well, what am I really what am I really doing from here? I just like unlocking skins and stuff for my ball is a different color. So actually, yeah, the unlocks were not very interesting, and like I don't think there were enough ideas for what to do with like the ball or power ups or stuff, and like because like the actual core game is so simple in terms of like controls. Like I feel like it didn't really offer anything more mechanically interesting, or it wasn't giving me any more sort of like ideas or something. It felt like very like Flash game. Even I think there's a lot of Flash games that have more ideas. But it really felt like I had kind of just seen everything at that point. And maybe if I was like this is probably the type of game that I would have played on my on like a browser in the middle school computer lab or something. I could very easily see that. And I think I remember some of like a Super Hexagon is another one of these games, of like they all look very nice, and they have this like very, very easy to explain sort of like core mechanic, but it's just like I don't think that there's enough there to like keep going, and so that's like another, I guess that's like another big warning, is like the game needs to have enough ideas to make people want to keep playing, or they just won't. And that, I guess that comes with like the price too, of like I think all of those like these Excel like little micro games are pretty cheap, like $3 or less. So they were kind of like priced like early iOS games, or actually they would be expensive for early iOS game, because like Angry Birds. Angry Birds is not quite early. I think it's like maybe like a year or two into like really figuring out like iOS games. Like Angry Birds has a lot of ideas in it in terms of like the different types of birds, and like the levels are all very like they have some sort of like core idea, some interesting idea that works pretty well with, it all works very well with mobile. And there, like the sense of progression of like going through levels and stuff like that, all I thought was we're comparing apples and oranges here, but like that's like the kind of level of like additional things going on that like a game I think really needs to keep someone coming back, right, or to be interesting. So yeah, like those that is a category of games that just like did not really work out for me, just because like I can play any number of games like that on my own, but it does come back to I think that's like my core problem right now with my Escape Velocity game, and so we're like reeling it in all the way, because we're trying to do something constructive here. Is with my game, like I think like that there's that core mechanic that is really cool once you feel it. I think I think it needs to be coupled with some sort of compelling fantasy, and that that is probably just as simple as like doing the rocket ship and like having some like good presentation, I think that will do it. But then it needs to have some sort of more ideas of like what to do with that mechanic, or it'll just end up like another Ding Dong Excel, right? And I don't want that to happen. But that means like obviously the game is going to take longer and be more expensive. Like the more stuff that you put on it, you put in it, the more expensive it is. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at. I have like a number of other games, again, still like installed right now. A number of like other indie games that I've only tried like bits and pieces of, because I'm also trying to go through my Steam back catalog. Uh-oh, that was a cop. I think everybody's speeding today, so should be fine. I'm trying to like slim down the number of things there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess like the next, I'm the whole point of this exercise is I am in search of ideas, of game ideas right now. Of like I've already covered a little bit on this show. I have this very fun core mechanic. I have some ideas that are kind of like on theme for it. I think that work pretty closely, but I think there's like needs to be something else on top of it, so I don't know. Like the interesting things that I've wanted to explore in like other game ideas is that like time loop concept. So that might be something actually worth joining together with this game, because I think that's where a lot of like games that have really strong hooks are like those combinations of like two ideas, and that is what makes it unique and makes you think. That's like a talent stack right there, the hook stack. So I think I've got to go play Outer Worlds and see what those guys came up with. Oh yeah, that could be one. Yeah, maybe like there was that idea of like a racing, some sort of like gravity-based racing sim. That could be cool. That could be interesting, but I don't know if like that'll probably end up being like a multiplayer thing. I just do not know enough about implementing network stuff to do that yet. I probably don't want that to be my first game. But that's an idea of like just combining stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of like what I'm looking for. Playing a bunch more games, trying to come up with some ideas, and then hopefully have somewhere more interesting to take whatever I come up with. So I think that's pretty much it for today. I didn't quite make it to work yet, but that's fine. Thank you very much for watching / listening. I hope you have an excellent rest of your day, and farewell. I gotta figure out how to sign it off on these better, I guess.